Good morning. My name is Ken Burton. I'm the Chief of Police for the City of Columbia, and I appreciate you being here this morning. We wanted to talk to you a little bit about our internal affairs report. I'm going to introduce a gentleman here that supervises that unit here in just a second. He's going to talk about 2015 and how we did as it relates to citizen complaints, use of force. Actually, we call it response to resistance. I want to talk a little bit about that here. Almost about 2 years ago, I think, we decided to change our policies from reading use of force. Police officers do not use force. Police officers respond to resistance. So whatever the citizen or the contact does, they control whether or not a police officer uses force and whether that force is escalated. So we've changed our policies and our terminology, and we now refer to it as responding to resistance. The Columbia Police Department uses a software program called Blue Team, and we record every single time that an officer uses force or responds to resistance. That includes handcuffing without arrest. That includes pointing a gun at someone. Whether or not anybody's hurt is irrelevant. We track it all, and we keep track of it for the purposes of bettering our training or correcting errant behavior on the part of an officer. We use it as corrective method to an officer that may be having issues. So every single one of those use of force, response to resistance, is recorded, and we're going to give you the details on that today. My staff is here and will be available to answer questions for you as well. But right now I'm going to turn it over to Sergeant Brian Tate, who is the supervisor over the Internal Affairs Unit.
Good morning. Sergeant Tate, T-A-T-E, and I'm over the Internal Affairs Division with the Columbia Police Department. I came to the unit in November of 2015, so I'm fairly new. So basically, when we looked at this report, we compile it every year, and we compose the numbers through our Blue Team and IA Pro computer system. And what we saw throughout the year is that our calls for service were down approximately 1,300. And we attribute our calls of service being down for several reasons. We implemented online reporting to where people can call in online and make reports, and several such as vandalism, bicycle harassment, some suspicious activity, accident reports, shoplifting is a big one, graffiti, and disabled parking violations. So those aren't tracked as far as in our call history, but that's what we attribute to our calls for service being down. Also, our self-initiated calls were down approximately 5,700, and we determined that to be with the disbandment of the traffic unit. They're not able to make as many stops due to the high number of calls of service. And overall, total calls were down 7,100, and our arrests were down approximately 353. Not a big number, but we always want our arrests to be down, obviously. So if people aren't committing crimes, well, obviously we're not going to make those arrests. We did find through these numbers that we did overcome resistance, and that was up 42 times from 2014. And our biggest jump that we saw was, handcuffing was actually up. And again, like the chief said, we track every time we handcuff somebody and not formally arrest them. In 2014, we found that number to be 118, and in 2015, it was up to 144. Again, that's handcuffing and release. We also saw an increase in exhibiting a firearm. That's when we point a firearm at somebody, and we're pretty constant about and tracking that, and we stress to our officers the importance of making sure that we do report that, because that is a use of force. And it was 2014 we had 150 uses, and in 2015 it went up 197. We also found in 2015 that our complaints went up 22 times, and where we mostly saw the increase in complaints is internally. And we believe that shows that we're keeping our own house clean, where we have supervisors and other officers pointing out misconduct on our own officers, and those get investigated just as well as the external complaints. We also saw that our compliments were up from 2014. It was up 30 times, so that, we do have people out there that appreciate that we are doing a good job for them, so we appreciate those. We also seen that our social media has assisted with our citizen contacts. Our Facebook followers increased nearly 2,000 people in 2015, and our Twitter followers increased nearly 1,500 in 2015. And in January 2015, we launched our YouTube channel, and now has over 7,000 views. At this point, I just kind of want to, you should have the actual media release with the numbers from the report. I'd like to answer any questions that you might have. And if you could, tell me your name and what organization you're with if you have any questions. Sir?
Yeah, Alan Berdziak, Columbia Daily Tribune. 39 of 51 internal complaints of misconduct sustained in 2015. Can you tell me a little bit about what some of those complaints were concerning, and if there's any disciplinary action on any of the officers?
I can't go into specifics of the discipline because that's an internal issue. That's a issue we can't discuss. I can tell you that our three top complaints were for excessive force, for being rude, discourteous, and for performance, meaning they should have done a report and they didn't, or the individual didn't like how they handled their call.
Are you talking about the internal complaints, or
just a combination of all?
Okay, but was there any disciplinary action taken? I know you can't say specifics, but was there any disciplinary action taken against any officers for any of the complaints?
On the sustained ones, absolutely. It can range from to verbal counseling all the way up to termination.
Was anybody terminated?
Not that I'm aware of.
Do you know when the last time an officer was terminated?
Specifically, I don't have that information.
Mark Slavitt, KRCG. How have the body cameras affected your investigations?
Well, I think they've done nothing but help us. We're able to view that and have a firsthand look about what actually happened, so we're able to ascertain, by looking at those, that either the officer, did commit the violation or the misconduct, or they didn't.
Have any body camera videos captured any taser activities?
I believe so. I don't specifically view those unless there's an incident assigned to our unit. Typically, when a use of force is assigned or a response to resistance, it's tracked through the chain of command, and they determine the findings on those. Anytime that we would actually investigate those is when the supervisor feels like their inactions are questionable or it needs to be investigated further, and our unit was specifically investigate those.
Do you have numbers of how many times you used a taser?
I do. If you just give me a second here. It appears like in 2015, we used the taser in 37 occasions. 12 times it was just the actual deployment where we discharged it or a drive stun, and 25 other times where we display the laser or do an arc display, threaten to use it if they don't comply.
Alyssa, KOU. Since you guys decided to start releasing the Internal Affairs report 2 years ago, did that come with a new police chief?
No, I don't think so, because Chief Burton came here in 2006, 2009, okay. Sorry?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you guys have gotten any feedback from the public about transparency, or if you guys have seen an increase in trust.
Well, I would say so. I think that we advertise our complaint process. We encourage people to file a complaint because we definitely want to know if our officers are doing things they shouldn't be doing. We also advertise that we want people to compliment our officers as well. And obviously, we do have the Citizen Review Board, and that would be a question for them whether or not they're seeing an increase in appeals or conversations with their board.
I have a question probably for Chief Burton. I was hoping you could kind of tell us a little bit about your process when you're, reviewing the complaints against officers internally and externally, and if you could tell us about why you may have sustained a few of them, if you can share any of those details, and I know it starts with the blue team report or any complaint a citizen might make. Can you just tell us about that?
Right. A couple of years ago, at the request of the review board, I believe it was, we started taking every citizen input as a complaint. Prior to that, we were separating them. If they actually alleged misconduct, it was a complaint, but if they were saying something that wasn't necessarily misconduct, we didn't call it a complaint. Now we call everything that a citizen calls in that they don't like a complaint. And they're all investigated, whether it's at the supervisory level or internal affairs, depends on the severity of the allegation. Once it's investigated by either the first line supervisor or internal affairs, it's forwarded through the chain of command where the sergeant, officer sergeant reviews it, the lieutenant reviews it, the assistant chief reviews it, the deputy chief reviews it, and then it comes to me. So it goes all the way through the chain of command. The outcomes for those can be sustained, which means that the allegation did occur and we've been able to prove that it did. Not sustained, which is not enough evidence to prove or disprove the complaint. So it's kind of a he said, she said type thing. Unfounded means it didn't happen. We were able to prove that. And exonerated is when the officer did commit the act, but it was totally justified and within policy. So once it reaches my desk, then I either agree or disagree with the chain of command. And sometimes I will ask to see the officer because I want to talk to them, make sure they understand what just happened. And so the officer has an opportunity to come and visit with me. At the end of that time, I can either increase, decrease, eliminate the discipline altogether. And I actually do that quite a bit to the chagrin of my chain of command because I believe that when an officer comes in and says this behavior won't happen again, that they deserve at least consideration for a lesser punishment.
Can you share any details about why you sustained any of these or?
Because they occurred. If they're sustained, it means that the misconduct occurred.
Was there any particularly serious allegations of misconduct, or were most of them just rudeness? Or
You know, it depends on what you talk about serious. I mean, something as simple as a driving infraction can be serious if the officer's putting themselves or someone else in danger. So it's kind of hard to put a finger on, you know, what you're talking about danger. The whole line of work can be dangerous. So behavior could seem minimal to the outside, but internally we would look at it very seriously. And driving conduct is a good example of that.
did you sustain any external complaints that put citizens in danger by any actions of your officers?
I'm going to have to refer, I don't believe there were anything related to danger to someone outside the department, no.
Chief, I had a question about just your opinion about the conduct of your officers during the past year. Could you tell us maybe what you're proud of what they've done and what are some of the things they need to work on?
I'm very proud of the fact that we use force very, very sparingly. We respond to resistance, and we do what we have to do to get our job done. But we don't abuse people, and there's absolutely, no one can find any evidence of that. This is not that kind of a department. We do our job, we do it to the best of our ability, and when we're forced to use force, when we respond to resistance, we do so, and we do so appropriately. I don't have any issues whatsoever, and I wouldn't change a thing. That's one of the reasons we're here today, is because I'm very proud of that fact. Other questions? I'd also like to announce real quickly here, we're going to make an effort. Someone referred to openness and transparency. We're going to make an effort to have a quarterly review with you where my command staff will be made available, and we'll just talk about current events in the department. And we'll try to do that about once a quarter. I'm not promising a date at this point because it's going to have to be fluid, but we'll give you plenty of notice. We'll have a time like this where we can just sit down and talk about issues that are occurring in the department and in the city. Yes, ma'am.
Deborah, ABC 17. Is there anything you guys are going to look to improve on for this coming year?
We look to improve in everything we do, but what we're talking about today happens to be one of the things I think we do the best. And like I said, we have had some unfortunate situations this year. We had an officer involved in a shooting this year. We don't like for that to happen, but that's the reality of the job. But the way that officer handled that was just stellar. And so when we do things well like that, we do what we have to do, and we do it well. It makes us all very proud to be a part of the agency. If there are no other questions, we'll conclude this, and I thank you for your time and your patience.